In 1978, the average Chinese person earned less than someone in Bangladesh. For decades later, China builds more infrastructure in a year than most countries build in a decade. It's the world's second largest economy. It manufactures a third of everything you own. And it did all of this without holding a single competitive election. This shouldn't be possible. Every economics textbook written in the last 50 years says the same thing. Democracy and capitalism go together. Free markets need free people. You can't have one without the other, except China did. And the West is still trying to figure out how. Let's start with the number that breaks the model. In 1980, China's GDP was $305 billion. By 2023, it hit 17.9 trillion. That's not growth. That's a reinvention of what growth means. To put it in perspective, it took Britain 200 years to industrialize. It took America 100. China did it in 30. But here's what makes economists uncomfortable. This didn't happen because China embraced freedom. It happened because they controlled it, every step, every factory, every city. Beijing decided when the economy would open, how fast it would grow, and who would benefit. There was no debate, no opposition party, no free press asking hard questions. Just results. And for a long time, the results were undeniable. The story really begins with one man, Deng Xiaoping, short guy, quiet, survived 3 political purges. By the time he took power in 1978, he'd watched Mao's Cultural Revolution destroy the country from the inside. 20 million people dead. The economy in ruins, ideology everywhere, prosperity nowhere. Deng had a different idea. He said something that would change everything. It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. Translation: ideology is useless if people are starving. So, he made a deal. The Communist Party would stay in power. Forever. No elections. No challenges. But in exchange, they'd open the economy, let people start businesses, let foreign companies build factories, let capitalism run wild, as long as it didn't threaten the party. This wasn't freedom. It was a transaction, and it worked. Here's how they pulled it off. First, cheap labor. In the early 1980s, hundreds of millions of people were stuck in rural villages, living on subsistence farming. Deng moved them into cities. Fast, he built special economic zones, entire urban areas designed for one thing: manufacturing. Shenzhen went from a fishing village of 30,000 people in 1979 to a megacity of 12 million by 2020. Western companies saw an opportunity. Pay a Chinese worker $2 a day instead of 20 in Detroit. Same product, better margin. They flooded in. China became the factory floor of the world. Second, infrastructure on steroids. Democracies build slowly. You need environmental reviews, public hearings, lawsuits, elections. In China, if the party decides a city needs a high-speed rail line, the rail line gets built. No debate. In 2008, they had 0 miles of high-speed rail. By 2023, they had 26,000 miles, more than the rest of the world combined. Third, state control of capital. Chinese banks aren't independent. They're tools. When Beijing wants to stimulate the economy, banks lend trillions of dollars. Doesn't matter if the loans make sense. A local government wants to build a highway to nowhere. Approved. A developer wants to construct a ghost city for 1 million people who don't exist. Funded. The Western model says this should create chaos, inefficiency, collapse. But it didn't. For decades, it just created more growth. Now here's where things get strange. China's economy runs on debt. Massive, unimaginable debt. By 2023, total debt in China hit 350% of GDP. That's over $60 trillion. For context, the US debt to GDP ratio is around 120%, and people lose sleep over that. In any normal economy, this would trigger a crisis. Greece collapsed at 180% debt to GDP. Japan stagnated for 30 years, under similar weight, but China just kept going. Why? Because the debt isn't real in the way we understand debt. It's internal. The government borrows from state-owned banks, which lend to state-owned companies, which build projects for local governments, which are also controlled by the state. It's a closed loop. The money goes in circles. As long as everyone pretends the debt will be repaid someday, the system continues. It's not capitalism. It's not communism. It's something else entirely. One economist called it capitalism with Chinese characteristics. Another called it authoritarian efficiency. A skeptic might call it the world's largest Ponzi scheme that hasn't collapsed yet. But the model is starting to crack. China's population is shrinking. In 2022, for the first time in 60 years, deaths exceeded births. The one-child policy, designed to control population growth, worked too well. By 2050, China will have more people over 60 than under 20. You can't run a growth economy when your workforce is retiring. The real estate sector, which drives 30% of China's GDP, is imploding. Developers borrowed trillions to build apartments no one can afford. Companies like Evergrande, once worth $50 billion, defaulted on $300 billion in debt. The largest property developer in the world went bankrupt. And it's not alone. Youth unemployment hit 21% in 2023 before the government stopped publishing the data. 21%, that's 1 in 5 young people with a degree and no job. In a system that promised prosperity in exchange for obedience, that's a dangerous math problem. And then there's the geopolitical reality. The West is pulling back. COVID exposed the risk of relying on China for everything. Semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, batteries. Countries are the risking, which is a polite way of saying they're rebuilding factories at home, even if it costs more. The era of endless Western capital flooding into China is over. So, what does this all mean? For years, China was held up as proof that you don't need democracy to build wealth, that freedom and prosperity are separate, that a smart, centralized government can outcompete the chaos of democratic capitalism. And for a while, the evidence supported that. But here's the thing about authoritarian systems. They're incredible at short-term efficiency. Building roads, mobilizing labor crossing dissent. What they're terrible at is adaptation. When the model stops working, there's no feedback loop. No free press to expose problems. No opposition to offer alternatives. No elections to force change. Just silence and doubling down. China's economy didn't grow because of authoritarianism. It grew despite it. The growth came from opening up, from trade, from allowing people to start businesses and own property and move to cities. The control came later, and now that control is tightening again. Under Xi Jinping, private companies are being reined in. Tech billionaires are disappearing. Ideology is creeping back into economic policy. The cat that caught mice is being told what color it needs to be again. So here's the paradox. China got rich by copying the capitalist playbook while keeping the authoritarian cover. It worked because they had 1 billion people willing to work for almost nothing, and a government willing to borrow infinite money to build infinite things, and a world desperate to buy cheap goods. But that moment is ending. The workforce is aging. The debt is suffocating. The global economy is rethinking the relationship, and the political system that delivered 30 years of growth has no mechanism to navigate what comes next. Which leaves one question. Can you stay rich without democracy? We're about to find out.